Excuse me a minute. Trying to get my timer to go. Ah, there it goes. Welcome to Martini time. So, the idea that I've been contemplating, working on today, and I do this, I get, some topic on Facebook, some idea, something I'm working with. It's kind of like Ariadne's thread. The myth of Theseus and the labyrinth and the Minotaur. So you go into the labyrinth of your mind of a topic, and it's confusing, and you don't know which way to go. Every turn looks like the other turn, and you start going in circles, and you start repeating yourself, and you get into a panic. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on. I don't have any certainty. I don't know what the truth is. So around and around, you meet other people walking in there. They don't know where they're doing either. They don't know what to do. This is the right way. No, this is the right way. No, this is. And then you get a bunch of people together to agree that this is the right way, and you have more people than the other one, so your way is the right way, but you all end up coming back at the same place. That's the labyrinth. That's the labyrinth of the mind. And so so you get out by following Ariadne's thread. Now, what's Ariadne's thread when in this metaphor? It's the Dharma. You surrender to Ariadne's thread. As long as you're trying to know which way to turn by logic, we went this way, it's logical to go that way. Logic can't get you out of the labyrinth. When you get caught in a labyrinth, logic is in there with you. So logic is going to say this way or that way, but in the labyrinth, every turn is ambiguous because you don't know which is the right way. They all look the same. Like when I give martini glasses away, and they say, dude, pick one. Oh, but they all look the same. Not that they're identical, they all look beautiful. So when they're all beautiful, you can't choose one because you can't find one that's more beautiful than the other. This was the fault of the temple in the Last Crusade with Indiana Jones when the Nazi had to pick the Holy Grail, and he picked the most beautiful one. Wrong. So anyway, the labyrinth I've been working in, we're all in today, the labyrinth that we're all in is why do these mass shootings keep reoccurring as if a ritual now. It is a ritual. Anything that recurs is a ritual. It's a Groundhog Day. And you can't find the cause. So this has been my labyrinth, and I've been following Ariadne's thread out of it. And so Ariadne's thread is when you want to follow Ariadne's thread, you have to surrender your logic and follow your intuition, follow your sense. It's kind of like following, you don't follow anything. But you follow you follow the truth. And the truth makes you whole. So what is the whole that we're missing here? Now, the problem with our logic and the labyrinth of the mass shooter, and it doesn't matter if it's a terrorist mass shooter or an American mass shooter, it's the same act, the same death, the same random event, and it's particularly hard to figure out the cause of the American shooter because they look like us. Well, he's a Muslim, so so that's why they do it. No. But anyway, so let's look at it from a sense of the whole instead of the part. See, we look at it, we're kind of like conditioned to look at individuals. At society is making up individual things, individual people, like marbles in a basket. And they all have free choice. we believe. So if you, so this is what sin means. Well, you chose to sin, but you had the free choice. You didn't have to do it. And the Republican Party particularly leans in that direction more than the Democratic Party. So the Republican, this is the free individual, freedom, free will, free choice. That's big, and it's important, but it's not the whole story. You see, because you can't figure out why somebody would choose to shoot 27 people in a church. You're not getting anything out of it. You get dead. So what? All of them are different. You see, so you can't find one first cause. If you could find the one thing that caused it all, well, you'd remove that cause, and that would remove the effect, which is the mass shooting. But the effect, you see, is the shooting. It's like the symptom, but you can't find the cause. Well, see, if it's a terrorist, a terrorist attack, well, then Trump says, well, he just removed the Muslims. Problem fixed. But that's not the answer, because the terrorists, the ISIS terrorists, you see, are homegrown Americans. They just might have a little beard. But anyway, so we're trying to get a bigger picture here, a bigger boat. And we need a different logic. See, the logic of identity is the logic that operates our society and science and common sense. This goes back to Aristotle and the Greeks. You can't have science without this logic. And it means, basically, that everything is one thing. So that this battery is a battery. And it is not a skull. This is a skull, found it on my back porch. This is a battery. The law of identity says the battery is a battery, the skull is a skull. The battery can't be the skull, and a skull can't be and the battery at the same time. It can't be two opposite things at the same time. That's ambiguous. That's ambiguous, you see. So ambiguity, we can't understand ambiguity because that's art, you see. Art practices ambiguity, or dreams. Ambiguities in the dreams. Alice in Wonderland is ambiguous. One minute the croquet mallet of the Queen of Hearts is a mallet. The next minute it's a flamingo. What is it, a flamingo or a mallet? Well, that's magic, or that's dream, you see. But the normal, really, the waking world, well, that's clear and distinct. The law of identity works here. There's no magic. There's no dream. Everything is what it is. That's how we navigate. That's what we believe. That's the way we perceive the world. So let's look at the. Here's a good metaphor. Here's what I'm working at here. Is that you have the society as a whole. American society is one. It's a mind. It's a psyche. The American psyche. But it's made up of many people who divide up into different categories, different groups, ideologies, religions, and whatever. But the American psyche. And there's a French psyche, an English psyche, you see. Of course, they all fit into the Western psyche versus the Oriental psyche. And then you have the humanity psyche. But anyway, you have an American psyche, which is different from a Mexican psyche or a Canadian or a collective, let's say. The collective is made up of many. So the collective, and I know so the collective mind and the individual mind are interactive. You can't have one without the other. So the individual minds interact with the collective mind, and the collective mind interacts with the individual mind. And this is a great metaphor here. So if this is my individual mind, it reacts with and creates the internet, and the internet creates it. So the internet is the collective, a big brain, and this is a little brain. but they're both mutually dependent upon the other. The big brain of the internet does not exist without this, and this doesn't exist without the big brain. So use that metaphor then to understand the American big brain and our little brains. So it's kind of like Pandora and Avatar. It's one big brain. So now every individual act, you see, that registers in the big brain, which is like a mass shooting does, now the media is a window into the big brain. When we look at the media, all of the individual brains are looking at it at the same time. So we're participating in it, and we can interact with it now. You could tweet this and tweet that, change this, change that. You can interact with the big brain and change it. Used to be all the individuals were passive. They couldn't change the big brain. You got the network news at night, and you couldn't interact with it. You passively received information, but now we interact with information. Now we are creators of the big brain, and the big brain creates us. So when you have a mass shooting, that gets the attention of the big brain. It's a huge groove in the big brain. Now here's another idea. The big brain has a memory, in the same way you have a memory. So if you repeat a particular action over and over, you're going to create a groove in your brain. And you're going to find that action to become habitual. It's called an addiction. You take your first cigarette smoke, no groove. Smoke 2, little groove. Smoke 3, bigger groove. Smoke 5, smoke 10, smoke for a few years. Now that groove smokes you. The groove smokes you, you see. The groove plays you because you created the groove. So we have a mass shooting now, and that creates a groove. And then another one, a groove. And another one, a groove. Now this needle comes up and down on the collective mind, the collective brain, and the individual brains at the same time because they're interrelated. So the needle is time or action. The needle is, like a record player. I love it because it's very mechanical. So the record player, when you put the needle on the record turns and the world plays. So the needle, when the needle drops on the record of the big brain, the world plays. And the world plays according to the grooves in it, you see. All the actions that we've done create the grooves in the big brain, and it plays us, you see. That's why it's very difficult to change society, because it's grooved. It's grooved, you see. And we're all being played by the grooves. Unless we become conscious of it, and then we don't play. So it's unconscious, you see. The music of society, of the collective record, plays us unconsciously. But we think we're conscious. We think we've got free choice and we're choosing all this stuff. No. We're being played. You see. And so it's a very slow process, but everything we do then adds to the groove. So the grooves get deeper. Just like the addiction gets deeper and harder to break. This is why if you want to change your life, you have to do an action. You can't think it. You have to do an action that goes contrary to your grooves. So if your grooves are habitually, say, to react this way, and suddenly you say, pause, wait a minute. What's the truth here? You lift the needle from the record, and you act in a totally different way. And that begins to create a new groove. And then you do that again, and the groove gets stronger. And now the new groove is getting stronger than the old groove. Because it gives you wholeness, you see, freedom, pleasure. Where the other one gave you suffering. Because it was unconscious. So you can get, this is a good metaphor to work with, you see. So the mass shootings then are the grooves that we are creating in the big brain by repeated mass shootings. So individuals come along, and they're totally unconscious people, they're going to fit into the groove. And they're going to ride this thing not knowing what they're doing. I mean, they know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're doing. This is what Jesus said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're unconscious. They're just acting out the grooves of society, of their group, you see. So anytime you have somebody in society who has no respect and no power, and they have no exit, they have no way to lift the groove off of this gathering storm of self-hatred, you see, they snap, pick up a gun, and go shoot everything. Because that's the groove that's there. And then that adds to the groove. So the next one comes along, it's faster and easier. So they get bigger and shorter, you see. Unless the consciousness of the big brain, and it has a consciousness, it's not all unconscious. The big brain, or a number of the individual, let's put it this way, a number of the individual brains become conscious of the groove and say, we've had enough, no more. And so the individuals begin to awake and want to act against the groove. And so they begin to collectively awake, and when a saturation point is reached, something in the big brain switches, flips, and suddenly a new action is possible. A new way of dealing with the problem is possible. A creative action, one that never happened before, one that no one thought of before. It has to be creative, or else it's just part of the groove. It has to be a spontaneous, creative action that is not caused by the groove, you see. So a new music is created. A new music. And because it's free from the groove of karma and the inertia of the record playing, you see, it's exciting. And you feel the wind of life in it. You feel the Dharma. You feel the wind of life. Something's alive now. Something's true. Something's real. Because we know what the groove feels like. It feels contracted. You feel helpless. You're lost in a labyrinth. And every choice looks like the same choice. See? So, we need a new logic. The logic of identity works for machines, and it works when things are stable. Everything is this, you see. But in times of change, we need the law of ambiguity. So the law of ambiguity would say, well, the individual is both an individual and the collective, both at the same time. Now that's the same as saying that the individual battery is the same as this skull, both at the same time. So if I say the individual is the individual, that's the law of identity. And then if I say society is society, that's what the identity is. So that's the law of identity. It's duality. It separates. Everything is broken up into pieces. Logical pieces. So you got the individuals, they're all pieces, and you got the society, that's a piece. But they're not both the same thing at the same time. That's the law of ambiguity. But that's the only way we can understand this. So the law of ambiguity says the individual and the collective is both separate and the same. It's both two and one at the same time. Two, individual, collective, one. So from this understanding, whatever the individual does, the big brain does too. Because they're both mutually dependent. You see. Whatever one does, the other one does. Just like the mind and the body. Now we think, oh, the mind's one thing and the body's another. Mind, body is one in the law of ambiguity. So what the mind does, the body does. So if you have stress in the mind, your body's going to get sick. You see, they're interactive. They're mutually dependent. So they're one, but they're two. But our culture operates under the law of identity. So everything is just one thing. There's no whole there. It's all just a bunch of things. We can't find the one. And we can't find understanding when life is in flux like it is now, when society is changing. When society changes, when your life changes, the law of ambiguity kicks in. When everything is fine and stable and the same and secure and certain, the law of identity works fine. But when change happens, law of identity doesn't work. Thanks for dropping in.